The year 2000 really marked a significant change in the global economy. From about the year 1980 to about the year 2000, there was a real tremendous real economic growth in the global economy. But since the year 2000, we've been in kind of this bubble economy. The last two, in 2000 and 2008, kind of crashed in spectacular fashion. And we think that, again, we're at the top of another bubble, which again will kind of crash. And we've been trying to mask it in various ways. And one of the biggest ways, obviously, is by amassing a tremendous amount of debt. In the world right now, there's approximately about $200 trillion in debt. Actually, a report from McKinsey Global Institute last summer said that since the year 2008 in the financial crisis, there has been an increase of $57 trillion in debt. The amount of debt that countries can borrow has come to a limit, and they can no longer borrow. It's like this big giant Ponzi scheme. As long as you have more and more money coming into the system, then the system is okay, it's stable. But as soon as you turn it off and you can't borrow more money, well, then we're seeing that the various economies are starting to struggle. Our models are indicating that we're going to see another situation like we had in 2008, where we're going to see the stock market drop by about 50 to 55%. The other thing that we're seeing is that revenues and profits in companies are starting to slow down. People are tapped out. Most people can't afford to spend more money on things, and so the stock market is going to react to that as well. Some companies like Apple and Google and Amazon, some of these very profitable companies, are sitting on a large amount of cash, approximately $1.4 trillion. The problem is that they're not spending it. Normally, corporations don't like to have cash because cash doesn't really earn them anything. The fact that they're just sitting on the cash is because there's not any good opportunities to invest money, to grow companies, to buy other companies, or do the kind of activities that help a company grow. The other side of that coin is the debt. Because there aren't very many good opportunities to invest and grow the business, over the last several years what they've been doing is they've been borrowing money in order to buy back some of their stocks. And when they buy back their stocks from the market, it actually helps boost their stock price up. But again, we're seeing that starting to slow down. We're seeing interest rates starting to rise. And so a lot of companies are no longer able to use that strategy of borrowing money to buy back their stock. Without that kind of a stimulus, $500 billion over the last couple of years, we're seeing a lot of challenges for the stock market to continue on increasing in value. Most of us don't really look at the stock market or care about those types of things, but what really has impact is jobs. And when the stock market goes down and when companies are kind of hunkering down for a bad environment, they start to lay off people, they stop spending on investments and things like that. And so that has a real impact on everyday person because there's just fewer jobs available out there. So we see that since the year 2000, we've been on this steady downward trend in the economies. In the global trends, we see a lot more political turmoil, and that has a lot of economic backdrop to that as well. And while governments and central banks have tried to mask the situation, we know that the real economy has been struggling really badly. We think in the next 5 years or so, it's going to be a huge challenge, and we may see some real downtrends, a global depression maybe. Often in the Bible, God used financial crisis or a famine or some economic situation to really try and wake up His people to remember the purpose for which they were called. The Israelites were freed from Babylon and allowed to go back to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. And so a number of them went back and started to do the work. But it was very difficult work, and there were Samaritans there who made the work even more difficult. And so they actually stopped. They gave up and they went back to their own farms to rebuild their own lives. But God was really displeased with that. And so what did God do? Well, you can read about it in Haggai. The crops failed, all of the economic progress that they tried to make. The Bible says that when they brought their wealth home, God said, I blew it away. Why? Because of my temple that lies in ruins, and each one of you runs to his own house. I think it's still true today. We're in a condition that the Bible calls Laodicea. We think that we're wealthy and increased in goods and in need of nothing. And so what better way for God to wake up his people than a financial crisis? Perhaps the loss of some of our material wealth will help us to remember why we were called and help us to rely more fully on him.